So you have described your boundary and you've chosen your boundary, obviously, and so now it is time for you to justify your boundary. Explain why your boundary is the way that it is. So when you do your verbal boundary justification, the point of it is that you need to convince the reader of why you made the right decision, but you also don't want to repeat what's in Section 8. In other words, you don't want to say, this district is important, is significant because. What you want to say is the boundaries are there because. So it's important that you not be redundant, but that you very clearly just answer, why are these boundaries here? So the instructions are in your bulletin, right? 16A. But where appropriate, you're going to want to discuss the visual barriers, anything that's changed in the neighborhood, any kind of historic boundaries, any clearly differentiated patterns. Again, it's all in the bulletin. So I strongly urge you to look at the bulletin and look at the advice that they give. The other note is that you can't have discontinuous elements. In other words, you can't have part of your district in one part and then another island somewhere else. It needs to be one big blob, okay? No side blobs, just one big blob. So let me show you a couple examples again. So here is one that's relatively good. Back to Salem, Oregon. This boundary was determined using the National Register Bulletin defining boundaries for National Register properties. The major considerations applied to this district are the historic boundaries, exclusion of peripheral areas which no longer retain integrity, and physical barriers. In other words, this first paragraph is saying, look, I followed direction. Please do not include such a paragraph. Yeah, no kidding, you followed direction. That's not something you should pat yourself on the back for. All right, next. The district boundaries have been drawn to generally follow those of the Myers addition to Salem Plat of 1871. The proposed boundaries encompass those portions of the present Fairmount neighborhood that contain the predominance of buildings constructed between 1900 and 1940. The proposed boundaries are based on boundaries at a specific time in history, visual changes, and visual barriers. This paragraph is much better, right? So it's saying basically the boundaries were drawn to follow this development. I will say, however, it's not proposed. Your NR nomination is not a proposal. It is a nomination. It's just the boundaries, the district. Okay, no proposed. Next, Myers Street is the northern boundary because it is the northern limit of the Myers addition to the Salem Plat of 1871. Furthermore, the concentration of contributing resources immediately north of Myers Street is low. Commercial Street is the eastern boundary of the district. It is a major arterial and delineates a historic and contemporary boundary for the neighborhood. Luther Street is the southern boundary of the district. The neighborhood was generally developed from north to south, and there is a high concentration of later constructed resources in the southern portion of the study area. As the proposed period of significance, again, that shouldn't say proposed, as the period of significance is 1900-1940, the area south of Luther Street was excluded for a lack of contributing buildings. The western boundary is John Street. West of John Street, the topography begins to slope steeply down to the west toward the river. The area is excluded because it was clearly developed much later, as very few of the buildings are historic. So, other than that first paragraph, which again should not be there, the rest of this is actually very, very good. It tells you the overall shape of this is because of the Myers addition. That's number one. And then everything to the north was excluded because. Everything to the south was excluded because. Everything to the west was excluded because. Everything to the east was excluded because. That's it. That's all you need to do, okay? I recommend that you write this as a team so that you make sure not to miss any of these details, all right? Because it's important to express, right? The overall district is here because, very briefly, but then primarily the boundary here is because outside of that boundary, things are different. Okay, how are things different? And then you can move on to the next cardinal point. All right. Which brings me to the geographic coordinates. Originally, the NR wanted everything to be in UTMs, and now they don't. So the thing is, they're still changing. The change has been taking place over 10 years. It's very, very slow. So this is definitely easier than it was, but there are now multiple ways to do things, and the guidelines are not super duper clear. So I'm just going to go over UTMs real quick, just so you know what they are. But then I'm going to focus on just telling you how to get this done easy. So Universal Transverse Mercator is a type of geographic projection. And unlike lat long, number one, it was developed in the U.S. And it was developed because it was developed in the U.S. primarily, originally for the military and then for the Forest Service. The U.S. Department of the Interior, of which the NPS is part, obviously wanted to use that over lat long. Plus, it has some real advantages. The projection is better. I'm not going to get into it. We don't have time. But point is, it's the projection for this is actually quite good for land-based uses, which lat long was developed for water-based uses, so it's not quite as good. Plus, it has no negative numbers. It's metric-based, and it has a constant distance relationship. Point is, it's generally the standard for the Department of the Interior, but the NPS does accept lat long now as well. So when you find the coordinates for your district, you're going to want to find every time your district boundaries make a turn, you're going to want to get the coordinates of that turn, that point. So you're going to go into Google Earth. If you want to use UTMs, you can go into, for Mac, Preferences. For PC, you go into Tools and then Options. And then instead of lat long, you go to Universal Transverse Mercator and hit OK. And then when you drop a point on the map, it'll tell you that it's in zone 18S, and it'll give you the easting and the northing. That's the equivalent of lat long. You do need the zone, okay? And I know it's weird that it's S. You might associate S with south, but actually UTMs use the alphabet, and A is the South Pole and Z is the North Pole. So we're like further north, so we're the letter S. It doesn't matter. Point is, if you're using UTMs, you would write the zone once, so zone 18S, and then the easting and the northing, leaving out the decimals. So it's always 6 digits for the easting, 7 digits for the northing. So it would look something like this. So for each point on the map, and there might be lots depending on the district, you would have the zone, and then point 1 is this easting, this northing, point 2 is this easting, this northing, etc., etc. You can also do this just with lat long, and that's totally okay. So if you're using a latitude and longitude, what you need to do is have the digits plus you need 6 decimals. Okay, so you need to go to 6 digits behind the decimal. Okay, this I just took from an NR nomination. You can see what it looks like. So you can go either way, but you have to mark down every single point where the boundary of your district turns. All right. Let's move on to maps. So there's 3 maps that you're going to include with your NR nomination. A USGS map, a sketch map, and a photo map. So let's start with the USGS map. You have 2 options with how to deal with the USGS map. The USGS map is there to give you context, or I should say to give the nomination context of where the district is. The USGS maps are at a pretty large scale, so that means that your district is going to be a tiny little like space, the size of your pinky nail probably, on the map. But still you have to mark it down for the nomination. So first of all, the department does have the proper USGS map in the mailroom. So if you come to campus, if you're on campus, you can photocopy or even scan the USGS map and mark the district following the instructions in the bulletin. You have to make sure to name the district on the map and scan it, add it to the nomination. So that's one way to do it. You can also do this all online, by the way. So you can find USGS maps online, no problem. Just if you use a digital version of the map, make sure that it's a 7.5 or 15-minute series map In other words, that'll make sure that it's the right scale. Otherwise, it'll be the wrong scale, and that doesn't work. Right, so that's the USGS map. Next is the sketch map. The sketch map is required, again, for nominations, and this is one of the tasks that you're going to complete for this next assignment. So you're going to start with the base map you developed for the CRS report. You're going to convert it to grayscale, and then you're going to mark the contributing and non-contributing properties. Now, bear in mind, this might be different than what you did in your CRS report, because in your CRS report, you had not finalized your boundaries. Obviously, if a property is outside the boundaries, even if it could potentially be contributing, it is no longer contributing because it's outside the boundaries. You're going to need to make some changes. You're going to mark the edge line of the district, and as usual, you're going to have a scale bar, north arrow, and legend, and when you're all done, it's going to look something like this. So this is a map from a few years ago, and you'll notice it's got the north arrow, it's got the scale bar. The contributing buildings are filled in black. That is the standard. That is how you should do it. Contributing are filled in. Non-contributing are not filled in. The boundary line, notice how that is also in the legend, and the UTM coordinates in this case. You can also, as I said, use lat long. It is easier if you number these on the map, because then you can refer to that number in the when you list the coordinates. So you can say point 11 or point point 1 instead of College Avenue and whatever street where it's turning. So yeah, it should look something like this. All right, next are the photos, and you know what? I'm going to take another break, and then we're going to start again.